Time has a peculiar way of reshaping our memories. Faces lose their sharpness, and the stories we tell ourselves grow cleaner, more polished. The painful moments once so vivid blur and fade, their edges softened by the passage of time. For decades, Rob Reiner existed in this curated space, an in-between place that hovered between the truth and the myth people had created around him. He wasn't just a filmmaker, he was a man of heart, a director whose work celebrated human connection, friendship, and moral clarity. To those who knew him, whether in the public eye or behind closed doors, he was a figure who seemed beyond reproach. His films elicited laughter without cruelty, tears without manipulation, and hope without pretense. He embodied what the industry aspired to be: human, grounded, and trustworthy. In a business fixated on reinvention and self-promotion, Rob Reiner was the beacon of integrity. To his audiences, he was someone you could rely on, a constant in an ever-changing world of fleeting fame. But beneath this meticulously crafted public image, something far more complex was taking shape. Away from the glitzy premieres, away from the applause of red carpets, another story unfolded, one that played out in silence. A quiet, private struggle that no one could see. This wasn't a scandal, nor was it ever intended to be. It was simply the slow accumulation of exhaustion, fear, and unspoken suffering. A weight that over time began to take its toll. This story isn't about how Rob Reiner lived under the spotlight. It's about what happened when the lights dimmed and no one was watching. To the world, Rob Reiner was one of Hollywood's most trusted and respected figures. But his reputation extended beyond the surface of fame. It was rooted in something far more profound, something far more human. He wasn't just another celebrity whose name had been etched into the history of film. No, Rob Reiner was a safe harbor in an unpredictable world. His presence wasn't just comforting because of his fame, but because of the genuine humanity he exuded. To audiences, he was someone they could trust implicitly, a man whose films seemed to come from a place of deep empathy, understanding, and honesty. Rob's career was never merely a string of successful films. It was a testament to the power of emotional connection. His movies didn't just entertain, they made people feel something real. They were the kind of films that invited audiences to laugh, but never at the expense of someone else's dignity. They made people cry, but not through manipulation or cheap tricks. Rob Reiner's films inspired a belief in the goodness of humanity, even in times when the world seemed to be losing its grip on decency. In an industry known for its obsession with fleeting trends and the constant pressure to reinvent oneself, Rob Reiner stood as something rare, a figure of consistency, reliability, and unwavering principle. His approach to filmmaking wasn't just about producing hits. It was about creating meaningful connections with his audience, about telling stories that mattered. What made Rob even more special was his willingness to speak his mind, especially on matters of social justice, politics, and ethics. He wasn't the type of person who shied away from speaking out, no matter the controversy. Yet, unlike many who jump into the limelight for the sake of drama or attention, Rob's words never felt performative. They were rooted in a deep sincerity. Even those who disagreed with him couldn't help but respect his authenticity. He wasn't chasing the spotlight. He was simply living according to his beliefs, convinced that speaking up was not only his right but his responsibility. He understood that true leadership comes not from following the crowd, but from standing firm in what you believe to be right, even when it's not the popular stance. At events, Rob was not distant or aloof. He was approachable, warm, and generous with his time. There were no walls between him and those around him. He made people feel seen. He remembered their names, asked them questions, and truly listened to their answers. In a town where people often work to keep their distance, Rob Reiner took the opposite approach. He made connections, not through manipulation, but through genuine interest. For younger filmmakers, Rob was the embodiment of what success in Hollywood could look like without having to compromise on your values. He was proof that it was possible to maintain integrity while navigating an industry that often placed a premium on reinvention and self-interest. To many, Rob represented the ideal that Hollywood aspired to be, even if it was an ideal no one dared to fully embrace. He was the kind of man who could be counted on to do the right thing, no matter the cost. And Rob's personal life mirrored the same ideals. He had a long and devoted marriage, a family that appeared as stable and supportive as the image he presented to the world. His home life seemed to be a perfect reflection of the values he espoused in his films: loving, patient, and ever-present. When Rob spoke about fatherhood, his voice was always filled with pride and affection. His words about the importance of love, patience, and standing by your children through thick and thin resonated deeply with those who heard them. In these moments, the public saw Rob as not just a filmmaker, but a moral compass in a world that often seemed to lack direction. His devotion to his family, his commitment to being a present and loving father, made him a role model for many. Rob was the kind of man people believed in, the kind of man who gave hope to those who felt lost. His life seemed like the perfect example of the stability, love, and decency he so often portrayed in his work. But as with all things, the public's perception of Rob Reiner, the compassionate, strong, and unshakable man, was based on a carefully constructed image, one that over time began to show cracks. Behind the facade of a happy family life, a successful career, and a reputation for unwavering integrity, there was another story unfolding, one that no one was privy to. It wasn't a story of fame gone wrong or a scandal waiting to erupt. No, it was a quieter, more insidious story. One of personal struggle, of a man carrying a weight that no one had asked about. A story that was so far removed from the image of the strong, reliable man that it became unthinkable to those who only saw the public Rob Reiner. This story was not about how Rob Reiner lived in the spotlight. It was about what happened when the cameras stopped rolling, when the applause died down, and when no one was watching. It's about the silence that crept in, unnoticed, and the slow, steady unraveling that no one saw coming. The real story of Rob Reiner is not one of fame or perfection. It's the story of a man who, despite everything he had built, could not escape the shadows that followed him. It's the story of love, of loyalty, of moral conviction, and ultimately of the human struggle that we all face when we are forced to confront the things we cannot control. Behind the scenes, Rob Reiner's kindness had become his defining trait, a trait so ingrained in his character that it gradually became a weight in and of itself. It was the kind of reputation that, while earned through years of authenticity and care, could almost be burdensome. Studio executives trusted him, often turning to him for guidance, knowing that his word was his bond. Actors on set or off felt safe in his presence, knowing he would never ask them to compromise their integrity for the sake of the production. Crew members, too, admired him for his calm demeanor amidst the chaotic world of film production, a world that often felt unpredictable and driven by pressure. Rob never sought to dominate or intimidate. Instead, he led by example, through reason, through words, through values. He was the steady hand, the calming force in the middle of the storm. This ability to inspire loyalty was a double-edged sword, however. It created blind spots in how others viewed him. When someone is always seen as steady, dependable, and strong, no one stops to ask if that person might be struggling. No one wonders if the weight they carry is becoming too much to bear. When someone is known for their strength, it's easy to forget that they might also be hiding their own fears, their own insecurities. As time went on, Rob's world began to shrink without anyone noticing. The dinner invitations started to dwindle. The spontaneous visits from friends, the moments of shared laughter and camaraderie became fewer and farther between. He was becoming more and more of a ghost in the places he once filled with life. But in Hollywood, disappearing for a while is not unusual. Silence is often perceived as a personal choice, a desire for solitude, not a sign of something amiss. After all, Rob was Rob, steady, reliable, self-assured. Who would think that anything was wrong behind closed doors? However, Rob's silence was not a choice. It was a shield, a fragile barrier between himself and a reality he could no longer ignore. For years, Rob had been the emotional anchor in every room he entered. People leaned on him, taking comfort in his calm presence, seeking his guidance in times of uncertainty. Yet in all those years, no one, not even his closest friends, stopped to wonder if Rob himself might need someone to lean on. It was the trap of his own reputation. The assumption that he was the strong one, the one who had everything under control, when in reality, he was quietly drowning in a struggle that no one could see. And that's when the cracks began to show. The moment his silence shifted from a sign of strength to a symbol of quiet suffering. Sally SDRS, one of Rob's closest friends, kept her silence for years, not because she didn't see what was happening, but because she believed that silence was the best form of protection. She had known Rob longer than anyone, long before the fame, long before the spotlight of Hollywood had cast its glow on him. Their bond went beyond shared experiences in the industry. It was a bond built on decades of friendship, disappointment, success, and personal moments that no one else had witnessed. Trust was the foundation of their relationship. It was something that they had built together, step by step, over the years. It wasn't something the public could ever fully understand, nor did they have the right to. But as Rob grew quieter, Sally began to see the subtle changes in him. The man she once knew, the man who stood tall and strong, unwavering in the face of any challenge, was starting to shrink, weighed down by a burden that he couldn't carry anymore. She saw it in the little moments, those fleeting pauses in their conversations when his eyes would drift away, a telltale sign that he wasn't fully present anymore. He was always there physically, but emotionally he had withdrawn. There was a sense of waiting, a constant air of apprehension that hung around him. And that's when Sally realized something was wrong, something deep and unsettling, something that wasn't just a phase. It was a threat that had been silently growing within Rob's home for far too long, a threat that no one, not even Sally, had fully recognized until it was too late. Rob began canceling plans at the last minute. Invitations he would have once jumped at, gatherings he had enjoyed in the past, now seemed like things to be avoided. Friends tried to organize small reunions, low-key moments meant to lift his spirits, to show him that they were there, that they cared. But Rob turned them all down. His reasons were always polite, always vague, and yet something about them felt off, like an excuse. It wasn't until one afternoon that everything changed. Sally drove by his house unannounced on a hunch that she needed to see him to make sure he was okay. The blinds were drawn in the middle of the day, an odd sight for a man who was usually so open and welcoming. The house felt sealed off, more like a bunker than a home. She sent a simple text, "I'm outside." She waited, hoping for him to come to the door. Hours passed before a reply finally came, just 2 words. "He's home." Sally would later say those 2 words told her everything she needed to know. They weren't casual, they weren't neutral. They carried fear, exhaustion, and resignation all at once. To Sally, it sounded like a warning, a cry for help that had been buried beneath layers of silence. After the tragedy, Sally began to revisit moments she had once brushed aside, moments she had told herself were just small, insignificant signs. But now they haunted her. One such moment stood out painfully in her mind. Rob had shown up one day with bruises, his explanation simple, almost dismissive. "I fell, it's nothing." But when Sally looked closer, something didn't add up. The bruises didn't match the story. They looked deliberate, like a hand had caused them, not gravity. She asked him directly if someone had hurt him. Rob didn't answer. He turned away, avoiding her gaze. That silence stayed with her longer than any spoken word. It was the kind of silence that echoed in her mind, begging for an explanation that she could never get. Sally knew that Rob was trapped in a contradiction that no parent should ever have to face. He believed in accountability, he believed in compassion, and he believed that love could fix anything if given enough time and effort. But that belief, while noble, had become his prison. Every boundary he considered, every attempt to establish limits, felt like an act of betrayal. Every difficult decision he had to make, every step away from the chaos, felt like abandonment to him. He couldn't bring himself to let go, to draw the line, because in his mind, that would mean giving up on someone he loved. When Sally spoke about Rob's struggles, she didn't speak about them as failures, but as survival. Rob had quietly sold pieces of his life, pawning memories and moments of his own well-being just to cover debts, smooth over threats, and buy time. Not for comfort, but for survival. He was trying to keep the peace, trying to keep danger at bay, but he didn't realize that the danger was already inside his own home. What broke Sally the most wasn't just the violence itself, but the shame that accompanied it. The kind of shame that keeps people quiet, that convinces them to hide the truth, to lie for the people they love, and to absorb pain rather than expose it. The kind of shame that keeps you trapped in a cycle of denial, even when every part of you knows something is wrong. When Sally finally spoke, she made one thing clear: this wasn't a sudden collapse. This was a slow, suffocating process. Years of fear wrapped in loyalty, years of silence mistaken for strength. Rob Reiner didn't fail as a father. Sally said he loved too much and he loved alone. And when Sally SDRS finally broke her silence, she didn't just share a story. She shattered the illusion that dignity always looks calm. Sometimes dignity looks like suffering in silence until there is nothing left to protect. What broke Sally the most wasn't just the violence itself. It wasn't the outwardly visible signs of harm that shattered her. It was the deeper, insidious weight of shame that had been slowly suffocating Rob, and by extension, those who cared about him. This wasn't just the kind of shame that quietly isolates. It was the kind that keeps people silent, even when every instinct screams to speak out. The kind that convinces parents to hide the wounds of their children, to protect them from the truth, to lie for them to the world, to bear pain in silence, rather than expose it to the light. When Sally finally found the courage to speak, it wasn't just a revelation. It was a release of years of buried emotion, a truth that had been carried in secret for far too long. What Sally made abundantly clear was that this wasn't a sudden collapse. It wasn't an explosion of chaos that destroyed everything in one fell swoop. It was a slow, insidious suffocation, a creeping erosion of the spirit that had gone unnoticed for far too long. For years, fear had been layered beneath the surface of loyalty. Years of silence, mistakenly interpreted as strength, had compounded. Upon themselves. Rob Reiner didn't fail as a father, Sally explained. He loved too much. And in the end, he loved alone. His heart was full, but his burdens, too, were solitary. And when Sally SDRS finally broke her silence, it wasn't just a confession of a family's brokenness. It was the shattering of an illusion. An illusion that dignity always manifests as calm and composed strength. Sometimes dignity doesn't look calm. Sometimes it looks like suffering, quiet, unseen suffering, until there's nothing left to protect. To Steven Spielberg, Rob Reiner had never been just another name in Hollywood. He wasn't simply another director, another face in a sea of creative talents. Rob Reiner was someone Spielberg held in the highest regard, but not just for his artistic accomplishments. They moved in different creative lanes, sure, but they shared something much more fundamental. It was a deep, unspoken respect that wasn't tainted by competition or jealousy. They admired each other in a way that was pure, respect without rivalry. There was no animosity between them, no tug-of-war for the spotlight. They both understood, in a way few could, that storytelling wasn't just about the narrative. It was about human connection. Spielberg remembered Rob as someone who carried an optimism that was impossible to ignore, even when the weight of the world seemed to hang heavy in the air. In public, Rob laughed easily. His laughter wasn't forced. It was genuine. It spread warmth across a room, pulling everyone in, making them feel like they were a part of something good, something meaningful. He spoke about films with a fire in his voice, a passion that never dulled no matter how many years passed. Rob spoke about the future as though it was still wide open, full of possibility and potential. He had an unshakable belief that there was always room for something new, something better. To Spielberg, that optimism felt earned. Rob had survived decades in an industry that had chewed up many before him. He had seen it all, Hollywood at its best, Hollywood at its worst. If anyone had figured out how to balance the weight of it all, it was Rob. He had managed to remain grounded in a world that was anything but that belief, his unwavering optimism, his faith that things could always improve, made the warning signs easy to miss. Years earlier, at a quiet, relaxed gathering filled with industry friends and peers, Spielberg noticed something off about Rob. It wasn't loud, it wasn't overt. Rob stood off to the side, away from the crowd, his drink untouched, his smile present but distant. There was something about it that didn't quite fit. Most people would have missed it, too polite or too distracted to notice. But Spielberg didn't miss it. He walked over to Rob, made a light-hearted joke, and asked how things were going. Rob hesitated, just for a moment, longer than usual. Then, as if he was pulling himself out of a daze, he led Spielberg away from the noise of the party, stepping aside into a quieter space. What followed wasn't a dramatic confession, a rush of emotions, or an outpouring of vulnerability. No, it was something quieter, more reserved. Rob spoke in fragments, carefully choosing each word, as though afraid they might shatter the delicate balance of the moment. He spoke about his son, about addiction, about the cycles of hope and despair that seemed to repeat endlessly. Rob's voice, usually steady and strong, was laced with something Spielberg had never heard before, a deep, abiding fear. Not the kind of panic you expect from someone overwhelmed, but a quiet, dangerous fear. A fear that something was beyond repair, something that couldn't be fixed no matter how much love or time was given to it. Rob believed in patience. He believed in second chances. He believed that love, if reinforced enough, could change the course of someone's life. But here, in this vulnerable moment, Spielberg could hear the doubt creeping into Rob's words. Rob spoke about treatments, about structure, about doing everything he could to help his son, even when it drained him to the bone. Spielberg listened, offering reassurance, telling Rob that, as a father, he had done everything he possibly could. At the time, it seemed true. Rob had fought tirelessly to save his son. He had fought with every ounce of his being. But months later, when they crossed paths again at a major industry event, the shift was palpable. The room was vibrant and full of energy, loud, celebratory, packed with familiar faces. But this time, Rob looked different. He looked lighter, as though a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. His smile, when it came, was genuine. He spoke with a spark in his eyes that had been absent for so long. For the first time in years, Rob spoke about his son with a renewed sense of hope. "He's home clean," Rob said, "doing better, reconnecting." For the first time, Rob sounded like the man he used to be, hopeful, unburdened, fully alive again. Spielberg believed him. That moment stayed with him. It was a moment that fit the narrative everyone wanted to hear. Recovery, redemption, a family that was pulling through. It was the kind of comeback story that Hollywood adored. A story of struggle, of falling down and then rising again. It was the kind of story that felt earned, felt real. But what Spielberg didn't see, what he couldn't see, was how fragile that hope actually was. Behind Rob's optimism, there was still a war raging inside him. Rob wasn't standing on solid ground. He was walking a tightrope, balancing his family's future, his own well-being, and the hope that things would get better. Every moment of peace felt like it could collapse at any second. Every improvement, every glimmer of progress came with the nagging fear that it could all come crashing down again. Rob didn't see it that way. He didn't frame it as a fragile balancing act. Instead, he chose to frame it as progress. It was progress. He believed it. He told himself that it was something worth fighting for, worth protecting, no matter what.